Give this just a second to get started, Senator, so we can make sure that we are live on Facebook.
Okay.
I believe we should be. Let me just double check real quick. Yep. All right, we're good to go. Well, as folks start to join us, I will just start off by introducing myself. I'm Kristen Foster. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Get Loud Arkansas, and I'm so excited to be helping co-host this Speak Truth to Power webinar or live Q&A with Senator Joyce Elliott for Get Loud Arkansas. We're going to be doing a lot of discussion tonight about the upcoming special session. If you're joining us live or watching this after the fact, please share this video, like, comment, drop your questions in the chat. We'll be getting to questions later, and let folks know about this important special session that is coming up. If you don't know about Get Loud Arkansas, just some housekeeping on the front end. We are a nonpartisan 501c3 organization, which means that all of our work is compliant with IRS guidelines around not endorsing or opposing any candidates or political parties. And we are out here just trying to register and mobilize and empower everyone to vote and make their voice heard. And so, Senator Elliott, I'm so happy to see you this Sunday. And just want to hand it off to you to start and talk a little bit about what Get Loud is and why we're here today to begin with.
Oh, thank you so much, Kristen. And for everybody who is already joined us, I do invite other folks, and thank you so much for being here. This is really something that is almost spur of the moment because we're here because we have had our governor call a special session of the legislature, and that is going to begin tomorrow. Some of you might remember, or maybe you heard some of the talk that maybe there's going to be a special session, and that was the talk last week. It was not formally announced until Friday. I think I've got that time right. Not announced until Friday, and it's going to begin tomorrow. So part of what we like to do at Get Loud is make sure we educate people about the process and about the issues, just as a way of educating folks. So we're here to help you think about, remind yourself that when there is a special session, it is not just for legislators, it is for the public as well. However, as I say that, it's only going to be 3 days, and there's hardly been any discussion about it. When I say it's for the public as well, that means that it's really up to you to get engaged, and we'll talk about some ways that you can do that. And as Kristen said, we are 501c3. And the one thing we can do and should do with our mission is make sure people are educated about the issues that are going on. And if you don't know the rest of what Get Loud is about, I'll just tell you this really quickly, that we do very much concentrate our mission on registering people to get registered to vote, and make sure that folks who are low engagement voters who are already registered, that they get to the polls, fight voter suppression, and help communities do exactly what we're hoping you will take advantage of with the information you get today, to make sure that communities raise their voices so that they can help fashion the future of Arkansas. Because if you don't raise your voice, things will just happen without you, and that is never a good thing, because all voices need to be heard. So that's why we're here. That's what we're going to be up to today.
Well, I am so glad to join you for it, and I'm so glad to see so many people joining us online.
Oh,
so
great.
You're just now logging on with us. Please share this video with your friends. We want to make sure everybody in Arkansas knows how to get loud during this special session. And again, please feel free to drop questions in the chat, and we will get to those a little later in the program, where Senator Elliott will be answering some questions live. But to start off, I have a few questions for you.
As you would.
Yes, absolutely. So for folks who may not be familiar, you've been through a lot of these different types of sessions with your 20 years in the legislature. Can you tell a little bit about what a special session is and how it differs from a regular legislative session?
Yes. Generally, we can predict when the regular session is going to happen. For example, it's usually it's the regular session when the legislators are there for a long time, and when you start to wonder, well, when are they going to go home, kind of thing. But so that regular session will generally be around 90 days, and we know when it's going to start. And when you start to wonder, when are they going to go home, kind of thing. What happened? So that regular session will generally be around 90 days, and we know when it's going to start. And you start to wonder, when are they going to go home, kind of thing. What happened? I don't know.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. I think Michelle is on here to help with some of our tech and got caught up there in the echo with her mic on, so no problem at all.
Okay, so anyway, so we've had that session back in January, but the Arkansas Constitution allows for the governor to call us into a special session, and usually that agenda will be very short. And the governor will notify legislators, I intend to call a special session, and tell them what the issues are. The other thing that usually happens, not always, but normally, the governor will have been in touch with all of the legislators and be sure he or she now has enough votes that they know whatever is on the call, the agenda that we might call it, whatever is on the call, they have enough votes to pass it. But that does not mean that because they have enough votes to pass it, that you don't have a voice in what's going on. It does not mean that you should, maybe you're for it and you need to speak up and let them know that. Maybe you're against it, the same thing. The governor calls it, the legislators have to vote, but then you need to get engaged is the bottom line. And they're almost always 3 days, and 3 days because there's a requirement that we must be in session 3 days for business to be done. And don't be surprised, for instance, if, and this is not unusual, that third day happens just past midnight on the third day, because it's if for instance it's going to be on, say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, a lot of times legislators will remain in session all Tuesday night, and as soon as 12:01 comes on that Wednesday, then they can finish the business. That's the other thing about that's the other thing that's different, that we know is going to be a finite amount of time. And you can usually, and we're going to talk about contacting legislators, but you can usually maybe get in contact with them the same kind of ways that you do, which we'll talk about a little bit in just a minute, as you do it during the regular session. But it is the Constitution mentions something about, if there's an emergency, well, that's not been strictly adhered to. Because obviously the issues that we're going to be discussing, aren't necessarily emergencies, but it's at the call of the governor nevertheless. And so that's how they're different.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And call the governor. And, I like that you said it. It does make sense that someone would want to make sure they have their votes lined up, but that, legislators are still their own people and they're there to represent their constituents. And so that just because they may be on board initially, as they hear from people in their district, that can always change. It's not settled until the votes are in, right?
That's exactly right. And many times people just go, oh, they're going to be there 3 days. They know what they're going to do, but it is important that you know what you are going to do. Everybody has a senator and everybody has a House member. They need to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll have posted on our page this week the in-session phone line for House and Senate, so that you can call. It makes it very easy to just leave a message. We'll talk about that more later on, but it does make it very easy to leave a message. And so there are 3 agenda items for this session that have been called so far. And unlike a regular session, like you mentioned, these will be the only agenda items they're likely to consider. It's not like a regular session where every legislator rolls in filing new bills. It should be limited to these 3 items. And so I want to just talk about these a little bit with you,
Well,
Senator.
I should say real quickly, they can file other bills, but whether or not they get onto the agenda is a whole different story. It's difficult to do. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, there are processes that they could. That's not something I guess we really expect to see this time around.
No.
But so there's 3 items here that the governor has mentioned: tax cuts, banning COVID-19 vaccine mandates, and changes to the Freedom of Information Act. And I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time on that last one. But let's just start with the tax cuts. What should people know about this proposal as we head into Monday? These will go into committee like any other bill, and so folks will have an opportunity to weigh in. What do they need to know about the tax cuts?
First, you need to know about the scheduling because it is just packed into 3 days, this whole thing. Normally, you will have enough lead time where the whatever the issue is, the bill is on an agenda ahead of time that you might be able to decide, well, maybe I live in, I don't know, Prairie Grove, and you would have enough time to get in your car and get down here and be a part of it. But with this special session, as important as tax cuts are, it really kind of just goes by how quickly we can get things done as opposed to having a finite time. So something as important as tax cuts, and keep in mind, when we vote in a tax cut, legislators get to make decisions about what it's going to be for. And if you want to have your voice as a part of that, if they have not contacted you, and I doubt if everybody has with this short amount of time, it's going to be difficult to do. But this is where it really matters, where your voice is heard. The way we spend our money says a lot about our priorities. And probably if I were to ask each of you, look at Arkansas and see, what do you think we should spend our money for? A lot of people will say tax cuts, but I would hazard a guess that most people would have a list that won't look like the list that we have, what we are spending our tax cuts, spending our money for tax cuts. For example, I know that several people care about housing. That is a huge issue in our state, and it's getting worse and worse. A lot of people care about whether or not we have a good pre-K, good after-school care, whether or not parents, will have the opportunity to have jobs that they can go to because they know their kids are safe. There's just a whole list of things that we could spend money for. But no, that's not what we're going to do this time around. We're going to spend this money on tax cuts. And it's about that for the one, there are going to be tax cuts for the individual. That's going to be cut. And if for the individual is going to be cut from 4.7, I think 4.7% to 4.4. And there are tax cuts for corporations as well. And we're talking about the income tax now. People love income taxes. Most people don't even want taxes on income, me included, but I know I have a responsibility to be sure I'm engaging and knowing part of what I need to do in my state is to contribute, and that's usually through income taxes. And so we're going to cut the income tax, and we're going to. I keep saying we. I keep remembering I'm not going to be voting, y'all. I don't want to confuse people. I'm not still in the Senate. I'm just getting used to it. So we're going to cut the income tax, and I think the bottom line is to finally get to having no income tax, and a lot of people want to do that, like Texas and Tennessee, for example. And there is a lot to think about. Something I would love to have, I would love to pay no income taxes. That makes sense. And I know there's a group that did a poll to find out if people would want to spend, the money we have, the surplus we have, and on not just the surplus, but ongoing funds, if we want to spend that money to cut taxes. And of course, people overwhelmingly said yes. I mean, who wouldn't say yes? But, and I guess we can talk, people will probably have questions about why some states have no income taxes and others do. So I'll save that for later. So that's one. Then of course we have on the, did you ask me to talk about all three of these right now or just the income tax?
That was great. No, the income tax is a good place to start, and I think for folks' awareness, we do have a fiscal session where this could have come up in January, right? Like this,
That
when
is
we talked about
exactly
whether or not it was an emergency or not, we could have done this in January in 4 months, but maybe there was a tax cut emergency to do this now, or perhaps it was about other things. I'm not sure. Then the second one, which is I think probably not catching as many headlines and maybe a little less controversial for some folks, but is still very important, is moves to ban COVID-19 vaccine mandates. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yes. Some people might remember, when we had the legislature and the governor dealt with COVID-19 in the, I guess what was the 2021 session, 2021 session. And there was a lot of controversy over whether or not the state should mandate that people had to wear a mask, and we had to close certain businesses and maybe churches to any place people gathered in large numbers. And there was regulations to go along with COVID, the COVID-19 virus, to try to keep people safe. Regardless of whether people agreed or disagreed, I think it would be fair to say that nobody put anything in place or even had a desire to just to make people angry. Because obviously, I think everybody knows COVID-19 was something brand new. And we were doing the best we could to deal with it. Well, that issue now that's on the agenda says that basically there will be none of that. It will be forbidden. I'm not sure what the outcome of that is going to mean, but I would assume it's going to mean kind of like everybody is on your own, because there will not be, I think, a collective way that we are trying to protect each other or protect ourselves. You're on your own. It will not be mandated.
Okay, that makes sense. I have seen that coming out, but it has been it does seem like it's gotten buried a little bit between these two other big issues. So I appreciate you talking about that and giving us some information. And then the last one, and probably the biggest one that's making headlines, is changes to the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act, which is our public transparency and accountability law here in the state. Can you talk a little bit about what people need to know about this?
I think one thing you should know to start with, Arkansas gets deemed a lot of times for being on the bottom of this and the bottom of that, but there are some things we have done really well. And our Freedom of Information Act is one of those things that's considered, it's considered one of the best ones in the country. And it was passed initially, I think, in 1967. That's how long Arkansas has taken governmental transparency in that regard, has taken it very seriously. And it's been one of those things we've always just been kind of proud of. And there have been some tweaks and few changes over the years when it made sense, because no piece of legislation, imagine, something as big and as intricate and involved as our FOI law that's been around since 1967, and the way things have changed with technology, for instance, there are going to be some tweaks. One good example, I think, to think about when things have become a bit more dangerous, say, with whether or not our schools are safe, we made some responses. And one of those that kind of had a bit to do with the FOI law was schools have to have a security plan, for example. Well, it makes sense that you're not just going to throw that out, online. But the Press Association, legislators, and others, we've tried to be very careful over the years of keeping as much of it intact as we possibly can. So it's a big deal. It is a very big deal when we start making changes to that law. And there is a lot that could change, and this is one of the ones I think you need to read carefully, and I've read it, and still I'm not really sure what the outcome would be if we pass everything that's in it. Because what basically would happen is many of the communications that go on, for example, between two different departments, we've traditionally, and not anything about, generally it's not things that are personal, people's personal information, that kind of thing. But generally, if, say, there are two departments that are working on something that has traditionally been FOIable, it looks like it won't be in some cases, with the change in this law. And I understand, based on what I've read, and people go like, well, what's the big deal? Why is this even an issue? And from what I have gleaned and looked at, and the best I understand it, there is a lawsuit that has been filed now. And it's not unusual for a lawsuit to be filed, but there was a person who was asking for information that had traditionally been available, and nothing out of the ordinary. And it was denied. So when it's denied, this is your option if you can't work something out to get information that's traditionally been available to you. And some of the information that has been purported to be maybe putting the governor in an unsafe space if information is given out, it is just something that's still in the air, whether or not that's actually the case, because nobody with common sense would demand information that on the face of it is going to put the governor or anybody else in jeopardy. As a legislator, I've certainly had phone calls and letters that were very bothersome and very scary, but some of that stuff has not gotten out there, because to get it out there would put me into further jeopardy. And so, our police at the Capitol and the state police, they're very careful and very thoughtful about then they will tell us whether or not this is something that will put you in further jeopardy. And as I understand it, I don't think it's a big issue for them. But so there's a lawsuit, and apparently this is a concern for the governor, the lawsuit, if that person gets what he gets. But I don't see at this point how it would be detrimental. And if we can't figure out ways to keep this law intact and figure out ways at the same time to keep the governor or anybody else safe, that would be something very different from what we have experienced in the past. Because anytime that's been an issue, we've been able to work it out and keep the law in place. But this is when we start keeping information away from the public. This is the thing that concerns me the most, because more and more these days, I think the more we can share, the more we should.
Absolutely. And, I think that it was interesting timing to see that the lawsuit was filed, and then the call for special session came out the next day. Mm-hmm. And then, we're rolling into the special session immediately before that lawsuit even has time to be considered in a court of law. But
yes,
I do think it's an important point to talk about that. There was a really great statement that came out from the Arkansas Press Association talking about that, it is important to keep our government officials safe. And, nobody should be taking that lightly. But there's also a very serious aspect of, transparency and accountability to the public on how taxpayer dollars are spent. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's kind of the question that seems to be up in the air here is, mm-hmm. At what expense are we willing to, sacrifice our transparency in order to provide safety? And, I think there has to be a balance, like all things in that, right?
That's
in government.
Right. Yeah. And I think, and to me, the one thing I try to do this even in my own life. everything is not just, black and white or just really clear all the time. But it does come down to a balance. And I would tell you, as a legislator, I've worked we've had these, not a bill like this, but had bills before where that might have some effect on that law. The Press Association has been absolutely dogged and fair. Every time a bill has come up, they have got involved and talked with legislators and explained. They have been very fair. And I have never seen the Press Association come out as strongly as they have this time around on this particular bill. And when they get to a point that they are doggedly against something like this, I mean, that's a reason for us to pay attention. I would ask people to not just say, oh, it's just the press, you know how they are. That is not, history does not back that up. Because I served 20 years and I never saw the Press Association just be irresponsible and not work at trying to find that balance rather than, oh, we want what we want. No, they don't act like kids and, scream for the lollipop because, they have families. They understand what it means just like everybody else. Yeah.
Well, I have one more question for you before we get to our Q&A portion of this. And so folks who are watching us online, please make sure to drop your questions in the chat and we will try to get to those here in just a moment. But my last question, I think, for you right now is just what are some ways for just regular people, people who are not politicians, they're not necessarily, lobbyists, they're not super involved in the process, but they see this issue and they go, hey, this seems really concerning. I care about how my tax dollars are spent. I want that to be transparent. When there's a session like this at such short notice and it's going to happen so quickly, how do you recommend that people get involved and make their voice heard? Because that's really what Get Loud is all about, right? We want people to make their voice heard.
Yeah. Get Loud is all about, you get involved, make your voice heard, civic engagement. The first thing I think you need to do, I'm concerned about the calendar because it won't work as smoothly as it would, and not that it's always so smooth during the regular session, but this is really an issue. You won't know exactly what time and just exactly when these bills are going to come up. So get in contact so who's going to tell you? Get in contact with your House member, your Senate member, and ask them to let you know as soon as they know when these bills are going to be heard. Be sure you do that. That's number one, because they are the quickest person who will have that information to let you know when things are going to be heard. And the second thing is, if you're not going to be able to go to these meetings, and a lot of people won't be able to because of the time, you may, and you should do this perhaps tonight, if at all possible, or do it tomorrow as well. But you need to let your legislators know how you feel about these issues. And because they are not going to know, and I know they understand you're not going to have enough time to have done all the background research to be able to state your opinion about it, and that's normal. But just because you don't have all the time that you would have had during the session does not mean you should not weigh in on what your feelings are about all of these issues. If somebody says to you, well, how do you know what you're talking about? You haven't even seen the bill yet. Well, that is because the legislature has chosen to make this 3 days. It is not your fault that you don't have all the time, to read every single thing. And then, ask them questions that you don't have answers to. Ask them questions, how they're going to vote, and tell them how you want them to vote. Well, and also ask them why are they going to vote a particular way, so you will have some understanding. And read through the lines, by the way. Don't just take anything. So you may email them. You may call them, but on the House, now keep in mind, there are legislators that are senators who work on one end of the Capitol and House members who work on the other end of the Capitol. So if you want to call your House member, this is all online. You can, I don't know if we'll be able to put the link to the legislature, to their calendar online, but all you have to do is Google Arkansas legislature. It'll all come up. But there is a phone number that you can call to your senator and leave a message. And anybody who thinks that leaving a message is not something that people do anymore, and they don't care, legislators care when they get those pink slips. So do that for the House and the Senate end. And the other way, some legislators have their cell phone numbers out there where you can text them, and some prefer to be texted rather than getting an email. And it's hard to say that which one is better than the other, because some people like the idea of getting a phone call, some like getting a text, some prefer a text message. So those are ways you can be in contact with them. And it is not going to hurt one thing if you use all three. It's smart to use all three. And I think that's mainly the ways that you're going to do it. You'll be able to do it, but you may also, one thing that you should know is most legislators, not all, and it's one of those kind of what I call adjacent ways of communicating with them on social media. You can, legislators, not everybody, but most of them pay attention to social media, and you can tag your legislators on there, and you should absolutely do that, because when it's 3 days, you just got to use everything at your disposal. You just have to.
For real. Just, yeah, I always tell people back when I was training people to go and like lobby as a volunteer is be aggressively friendly.
Yes,
just you're going to contact them every possible way you can.
Yes.
And I think that one thing that I love about being able to call and leave those messages with the pink slip that goes on the legislator's desk is it's a really good way to start if you're intimidated. The people who answer the phone are nice. They'll help you figure out who your legislator is. They're not going to argue with you or debate you. They're just going to take your message and pass it along. And so if you're nervous or intimidated, that's a very easy, friendly way to get plugged in, that nobody's going to make you feel like you have to know all the answers or anything. It's just leaving a message, and they put them on the desk. The lawmakers see them and we'll read them.
And that's a really good point, Kristen, because it's, when I get to my desk and when I was there, I'd get a lot of messages, and I go, whoa, something is going on. And it's, so don't just assume. But the other thing to do is, because the people who will answer the phone are so nice, generally if you tell them, who you want to leave it for, and that's my legislator, you tend to think it won't always be true. But when I would get something, one of those messages was that was somebody literally in my district, because they will help you figure out who your person actually is. So that's usually helpful. And with time like this, sometimes I know I would get so many messages, maybe I couldn't get back to everybody, or phone calls. Then one of the good reasons to know, you let them know you're from their district, because they might have to prioritize. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't leave a message for somebody who's not your legislator. You may do that too.
Although this time, maybe don't leave a message for Senator Joyce Elliott, since you are.
Yeah, really, I'm not there.
We still get some messages sent our way from the legislature every once in a while, where folks have called for you. And yes. It's so nice.
Just today.
All right. So some of the questions we have some great questions in the chat. Julie asked, what is the process to testify for or against a bill in committee?
Oh, that's an excellent question. During the regular session, that's one of the really good reasons that I like regular sessions so much better. But if you want to testify, you may not do it online. That's number one, to get that out of the way. But you have to go to the Capitol, but you don't have to be signed up before you go to the Capitol. But when you get to the Capitol, and you find the you find out when the committee meeting is going to be. That's where you're going to testify. That's where you state your thoughts, not on the Senate or the House floor. So you go to the committee meeting, and there will be, sometimes there would be a clipboard with a sign-up sheet if you want to speak. Outside depends on, just where the meeting is, but there will be a place where you can sign it. Look for it outside the door first, and it will ask you for your name, where you're from, or something, and what bill you want to speak on. So you will either write the number down, or you need to get the number. That would be good, but just say tax bill or whatever it is, and it will ask you if you're speaking for or against. So you have to choose one of those things. So when we get inside and the meeting starts, the legislators are going to have their discussion back and forth, and there will be a point at which the staff person who's working with legislators will say, we have 10 people signed up, or whatever the number. And they will usually start with somebody against the bill, because a legislator would have spoken already for the bill. Then they go back and forth, back and forth. If everybody is for it, then they just go down that list. If everybody's against it, same thing. But if it's a mixture, they go back and forth. Most of the time, there is not some limit that's put on the amount of time you can speak. Although, if you go on and on and on, somebody might make a motion to say, let's limit the discussion to 10 minutes or something like that. So be aware of that. If there is, and the staff person will usually say how many people we have signed up. And if there are, 50 people signed up, you can bet you're going to get a limit. So you need to be thinking about that. I might say we will limit everybody to 1 minute or to 2 minutes. Don't spend your time complaining about, well, how am I going to do this in 1 minute? The clock is ticking, and you will be held to that. But that is the way that you do it. You get to that committee room, you find the sign-up sheet, and then they'll call your name when it's your turn, and write legibly so they'll know who you are. But you really, and here's the other thing about testifying. You don't have to know everything in the world to testify. Keep that in mind. You are a person with a regular kind of life. You are not the legislator that's up there every day doing this. And especially in 3 days, give yourself a break. You can sit and listen long enough, to help get some clarification about things. So don't, I don't need to, it's probably a waste of time to say don't be intimidated, because there's nothing wrong with being intimidated. What's wrong is using that as a reason not to state your piece and let your voice be heard. That thing about, you testify anyway, even if your voice cracks, it's still your voice, and you should use it.
And be loud.
And be, yeah.
But not
too get loud.
appropriately inside.
Yeah.
And, just a tip for folks, if you haven't done that before, you can get on the Arkansas Legislature website and find out what time committees are meeting, what room they're going to be in. And as someone who has no sense of direction, if you get up there and you're not sure where to go, Capitol Police have always been very friendly to me when I've asked them, where is room 318 or whatever. They're great to help. And so you don't have to know everything going in. There's lots of folks around that'll help and guide you. If this is something that you're new to, we want folks to get involved, even if it's the first time. So another question from Joanne is about the tax cut. She said, if taxes are cut, will personal property and real estate taxes increase? And I know you can't necessarily, speak to every specific bill or likely future, but what are your thoughts on that? Yes,
that's usually the case. I think I believe there are 9 states that don't have any income taxes. Texas and Tennessee, ones we hear a lot about, right here, because they were so close to us. Generally, taxes and or fees will go up because different taxes. I have family who live in Texas. I know what goes on. I know what goes on with them. They have quite high property taxes, because in some cases very high property taxes, because if you cut the income taxes, okay, that's all well and good. But then the money is going to have to come from somewhere. And sometimes, fees might go up, for example, on the cost of gasoline, that kind of thing. But there will be other places. People in Texas complain a great deal, in Tennessee as well, about their property taxes, but that's replacing what's not there. But the other thing I want people to think about, though, is Arkansas being, the small state we are, that we don't have as many resources as Texas or Tennessee, for example. So, for example, Tennessee has, their industry far outweighs ours. They have that, that big old Volkswagen plant, I think, in Chattanooga. When people have more to draw from and to draw on, and when in many cases there are, I don't know if it'd be fair to compare Tennessee and Texas, but the quality of life that people have really does matter, and whether or not they can afford the other taxes and fees that they have to pay. But the money has to come from somewhere, and they might have, Texas has a lot of oil and we don't have that. So it's not just that you can make a comparison, a contrast about, just with income taxes and say, well, if they don't have it, why should we have it? Well, I'd like not to, but the thing of it is, Texas and Tennessee both have other really big, much bigger productive sources than we have, for example, in Arkansas. If we had, more, what is the steel plant up in, Northeast Arkansas, we had something like that kind of all over, that would make a big difference. But we just don't have the industry that, a lot of other states have.
Okay, so another question we have here, I think this is a great one, is why is the proposed Freedom of Information Act bill looking to be retroactive to January 2022? And is that a normal thing to see where a law is written to be retroactive?
It is not generally a normal thing. And especially with taxes, for example, I think the tax bill says in it that the effective date is going to be in January 2024. But I think we have had some tax bills where, it was retroactive, maybe the last one around. I think we've had 3 tax cuts in the last 13 months. And so some of this runs together. But it is not that's not the norm, that we just have something that's retroactive, because, that's especially kind of confounding to me, because that has been talked about in terms of a safety issue. If somebody, for example, if the governor or if you or whoever it might be, there are some things to talk about the security plan when something is about to happen, or you can. I wouldn't, pretend to have all the particulars, but you can kind of see some sense in that. But for something that's already done, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I don't know why that should be something that should be covered under this bill, and therefore, have this retroactive thing to a part to it. Because if it's done, it's done. Like, for example, I've had to have some, bit of police intervention when, I've been threatened. That has happened to me. I can talk about it now. I didn't talk about it then, because it's something that, that was in the past. So that's one thing that kind of thing is I think something that really bothers a lot of people, to think that maybe this is a step too far, that we're just going to make something retroactive like that.
Yeah. Okay. So just one last question here. That from Teresa says, with such a tight timeline, is there a benefit to emailing a lot of legislators?
Yes, there is. There is a benefit, because the other thing that happens with this kind of session is there will be, because when you think about it, we have several committees. There will be committee members who won't have anything to be involved in. For example, if you are on, I don't know, pick maybe the rules committee. I mean, that's not a good one. I'm trying to think of the education committee, for example. I don't see where the education committee, is going to be involved in this. And so their legislators will actually have time when we have to wait for something to happen before there is something to do for everybody. So yes, it absolutely does make sense, especially if you start tonight, but it does make sense. And many times when we are sitting in a session, whether it's a committee session or in the House or the Senate, most people will have their phones, or they will have their laptops, and we check messages. I would check messages, and people still do during while deliberation is going on. So yes, it makes sense.
Is there any tips you have for, if you're sending an email like that to get it noticed, like should people put the topic, the issue in the subject line? Should they keep it short or give more detail? What are your thoughts on that to make it?
I would put, especially since this is so tight. So legislators are going to be first and foremost concerned about what somebody in their district says. I would put in the subject line, "I'm from your district." And I'm from your district. And it's a good idea to get the bill number and put like HB 1001. So they'll know. They know you're from their district. And then you've got, you just put the bill number in there as well. That's a really good thing to do. And the other thing is, two more things really important. I say this to people all the time. And it's not any kind of put down anything like that, but I understand sometimes people are so angry, they say things that's going to get their letters, deleted just like that. And that happens because I ask people to just remember, no matter what you think about politicians, there are people like everybody else. And when somebody starts a letter off, how can you be so stupid? That is not, that kind of thing will cause most of the time the legislators to go on to the next one, because that's just not a way to get somebody's attention. If you get their attention, "I'm from your district," about HB 10, that's probably going to get somebody to read what you have to say. So there's no need to be, overly insulting. There's no reason for that. Doesn't mean you can't express your anger. You just don't have to, go so far. The other thing is, it's a short session. Make it a short message because you want that legislator to read your letter. If you have a great big long letter with everything in it that you ever wanted to say, and everybody else is doing maybe 5 or 6 lines or something like that, or even less, that person's going to go on to start reading other letters because the legislator just won't have time to read all of that. And that's why I say to people, don't be intimidated and thinking you have to know everything, because even if you know everything, that person is not going to have time to read it all. So I like it that you're brilliant, but you don't have to say everything. And it's not a good idea to.
That's very helpful. I never really thought of that, of putting that, like, "I'm from your district," right up there up front, but that's such a good tip.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we have a bunch of questions still coming in. We'll kind of keep an eye as we can, but and try to answer these. We will be posting lots of information on our Facebook page and on our Twitter over the next few days, keeping folks in the loop about this. If you are interested in getting involved or not sure what's going on, you can definitely find the Arkansas Legislature website. Google that, get on there and look. It has the calendar, it has all the upcoming meetings. You can watch live streams, you can view bills. We'll be posting all of that. You can find the email and phone number for your legislator. And right now it is set for everything to kick off with the House and Senate convening on Monday at 11 a.m. and committee meetings beginning at 1 p.m. This is going to be very fast. And so if there's any way to get involved, this is the time to do it. And then I think just for us, is there anything else you want to say to folks before we close this out today, Senator?
I really am so grateful for everybody who has taken the time on this Sunday afternoon to be here. This is a great response. That's so fantastic. And I just want to just remind us, sometimes civic engagement participation is inconvenient. This is one of those times, but your voice matters just as much when you're inconvenienced as it does when you're not. So there are always, you've got the governor, you've got the House, the Senate, but there is this fourth thing, and it's called your voice. It is not complete until your voice is there. Remember too, when people don't hear from you, they assume you are okay with what they're doing. That's not a good thing. You need to let them know. Okay.
That is absolutely true. Thank you. And, remember our state motto, Regnant Populus, the people rule. I think that's so important in Arkansas, and that for that to continue, we have to have our voice heard and be involved in the process. And, whatever side you are of the issue, we want you to make your voice heard and be involved. And so thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Please, again, share this video with your friends. If you want to support the work that Get Loud Arkansas is doing to register and mobilize voters across the state, please go to our website, getloudarkansas.org. You can donate, you can sign up for our newsletter, you can find information about getting involved and registering to vote there. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day.